else. A businessman can look at the great demand, especially in California. He can look at the permits, the laws, the employee requirements, the hours, the health benefits, the environment requirements, and he can look at those and say, this is too much, this is over and above, and he might get frustrated with the demand. You as an employee can have a boss that puts a lot on you, intense deadlines, and demands much. And the demand can be staggering. You can be in a part of a church, and as you look at the church ministries, you can say, man, we lost this person, and we lost that person. I know our church, and it's happened to all churches all across America. 40% of people within our churches are never coming back. And you can look at the demand of the church, and you can say, wow, there's a ministry need here, and there's a ministry need there. And if you're not careful, the ministry needs around us can consume us and get us to a place where we become frustrated. The demand can be incredibly high. It could be from a spouse. It could be from a child. It could be from work. It could be because of work. And we come to the terrible conclusion, the conclusion that all of us dislike. I am not enough. To come to conclusions with your spouse that I'm not enough. To come to the conclusion with your children, I'm not enough. To come to the conclusion with your ministry, I'm not enough. To come to the conclusion with your boss, I'm not enough. With your business, I'm not enough. And it can be incredibly crushing, realizing if you're not careful, it can crush your spirit and it can send you into a place of turmoil. Now listen, when you start realizing that you have come to a place, a demand has come at midnight and is asking for something, and you don't have it to give, it can crush your spirit. The imagery this morning is the man at the door is a child that needs your attention, mom. A child that needs your attention, dad. The man at the door is your husband that desires something from you. The man at the door is your spouse, your wife that demands something. I just want you to listen to me. I just want to go on a date. I just need this. And you can look at this and say, man, I got this pressure from my boss at work. I got this pressure from my wife at home. I got this pressure on my kids. And you can look at all the demand. It can become very, very overwhelming. It could be your health situation. Some of you have gotten to a place in your life where your health isn't what it used to be. And you can look at the appointments that you have to go weekly, and the pills and everything that you have to do to keep your health up. And it can be demanding upon your life. I have 5 children and a number of ministries, counseling sessions, discipleships, preaching. And sometimes I could look at all the demand that's what's required of me. And I can come to the crushing realization that I have nothing more to give. When you and I come to the conclusion that you have nothing more to give, we truly only have 2 options: carnal or spiritual. It's the only 2 options we have. What do you mean by that? Well, the carnal mind can begin to deal with the demand. And here's what we hate most about the demand. The demand speaks to our ineptness. What bugs us most as Caleb is being demanded, there's somebody in his life will represent, Caleb will represent the person that comes, and he's the friend, he's the demand. He can come to me and say, hey, I need something from you. And as I look at my cupboards and I have nothing to give him, here's where I can come to the conclusion, I'm worthless. Here's this person in my life. I should be able to give them what they need, but it could speak to my ineptness. And there's nothing that we hate more than the feelings of unworthy or worthlessness. And so we do 3 things, and I want to give you the first one. When you and I respond carnally, here's what we do. As the demand comes into our life, here it is. He needs something. My son, my wife, let's use a spouse. My wife comes to me. She needs to be loved. She needs to be cared for. She needs these different desires in her heart, and it's my responsibility. And as I look at myself, I think I can't meet those needs. I feel worthless, and I don't like that feeling. And so here's what we do. We go on the attack. It's the very first thing we do. Here's what we say. She's demanding too much. He's demanding too much of me. Obviously, he's desiring more than I have. Therefore, the demand is greater. Therefore, you're the problem. I'm not the problem. Listen, if we're not careful, we can look at our children and say, it's not that I'm not a good mom. It's that this child is just very demanding. And it's a carnal response. It's a carnal response to attack the thing that demands us. My boss, he's just so demanding. You all right? I gave this illustration with our church, and the guy I used was a boxer. So I had to watch out. I think I'll be okay this morning. We can attack the demand. Well, you just demand too much. You just want too much of me. And we can push those things away because as we look at our soul, we think, I don't have enough. I don't got enough for my ministry. I don't got enough. So here's what we could say in our ministry, in our church life. We could say, Pastor, man, he just asks too much of me. He just wants too much of me. Doesn't he know I do this? And can I just be honest with you? If you serve in a Baptist church, guess what? 90% of churches are run by the small percent of church members within the church. You're not alone. When we look at our church and there's certain people, I almost feel sorry sometimes when I'm like, oh man, he's doing here, he's doing this, 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 he's doing this. And if we're not careful though, we can look at the demand that's coming from without and we could say, they're the problem. That's the reason I can't fulfill my demand. There's a problem with this. The scripture doesn't say that the man just turned him away. The scripture doesn't say that when this demand came into his life, he just shut the door and says, you get away from here. Can we not agree that coming at midnight is probably not an opportune time to get a meal? He could have said, you know what time it is? Don't we do this sometimes? Come on. I should have been told about this a long time ago. Or we could have a servant's attitude and just say, I have to meet the demand. We attack it first. But secondly, if attacking doesn't work, or maybe some of us in here, you're not very extroverted, so you won't attack it. Here's what you do. You hide from it. A man, you can hear me? Good. A man who goes to his wife, I don't even know where you're at anymore, brother. There you are. Thank you. A man or a woman who has a demand in their life, here's what happens with the men. A woman comes, his wife comes, she has a need, she has a demand. He can't fulfill the demand. It's hard for him. It's difficult for him to be a good listener. It's difficult for him to take her out. It's difficult for him to be the husband he needs to be, to love her as Christ loved the church. It's difficult. And so here's what he'll do. He'll pour himself into his work because it's far easier to ignore his wife and to pour into something he does have value in and he is good at than to pour into his spouse. He'll ignore the demand. A wife where a husband says, I have need of you, I need you to do this for me, and maybe a husband requires some things from his wife, it's easier for a wife to turn to her kids and pour herself into her kids. That's why when you have marriages, they say most marriages get divorced within the first 2 years or in the latter years. You know why? Because both spouses at one point said, the demand is too much, you asking too much of me, and she poured into the kids, and he poured into his work, and when all that's gone and all the distractions gone, they're looking at each other and they're thinking, I don't even know you. I've ignored you for so long, I don't even have a relationship with you. No, listen, at work, we can stop returning the emails. Oh, they just demand. We ignore it. I hope it just goes away. Here's the problem. He's not going away. The demand isn't going to die off. The demand is there. And can I just say this? The demand is there placed by God. God knows what God hath put, what do we say at the wedding altar? What God hath put together. God gave you your spouse. Amen. Even as demanding as they may be. God gave you your church. The Bible says you are fitly framed in the church. Just as a husband is fitly framed to his wife, a church member is fitly framed to his church. Wherever God's placed you at your place of work, you're not accidentally there. God has placed you with a demanding boss. God has placed you with a demanding spouse and a demanding church and demanding children. God has placed this in your life, but it's not for you and I to ignore it. And it's not for you and I to attack it. What else do we do, brothers? If we can't attack it, if we can't ignore it, and we start feeling those